Look, we'll talk about Kawhi and his shot a little bit later, but first, I want to start, Drew, with some of these NFL free agents remaining. So, we're past free agency, or at least the first wave of it. We're past the draft. Your team is probably digging at the bottom of the barrel here. Who are the best guys out there if you want to improve your team before 2019 starts? We're going to start by talking about all that. Do you want to start from the bottom to the top? Do you want to start top to bottom?
It makes no difference to me. Sharif, I'm glad you're joining us. Really, all these guys that are sitting there are either too high of a price tag that they're asking for right off the bat, or it's one of those players that teams just don't know what's left in the tank. So, these guys can be quality players and play good 16 or maybe a little bit less games than that for a team, or they could be someone that maybe like a Des Bryant where they get the first practice and they're hurt.
Now, Sharif's trying to calm me down a little bit. He says Denver will be fine next year, but I don't know, man. This sounds like the run is over. This was the magical year. No, I'm kidding. But I absolutely agree with you. These are a lot of guys that, for some reason or other, are not on a team yet. Sometimes it's the price. Sometimes it's the talent doesn't match what these teams want to do. Or sometimes these teams have gone into free agency and the offseason to this point saying, I can do better than this. And now in the next couple weeks, next couple months, we're going to figure out, no, we couldn't actually do better than this. And it's time to just, take that humble pie and go sign whoever's best available. We're going to talk about some of these best fits, or at least some places we think some of these guys would fit as well. Why don't we start at the bottom of the list? The 10th best free agent, in my opinion here, Drew, Shane Ray, defensive end or outside linebacker, however you want to look at it, formerly of the Denver Broncos, 26 years old. Plenty of talent coming out of college, but he never really kind of lived up to that talent in Denver, even when he was the third guy. Obviously, they didn't think too highly of him drafting Bradley Chubb a couple of years ago as well. How much of a market do you see for a guy like Shane Ray out there?
I mean, you're talking about a guy that completely underperformed where they thought he was going to be, had a little bit of field off the field issues coming out of college, going into the pros. A Missouri guy. To be honest with you, I don't think there's a huge market for this guy. I think it's going to be a one-year deal, prove-it deal. I think it's going to be one of those scenarios where someone is getting hurt and they're just desperate need for a roster fill, and that's where Shane Ray's going to find his place. Because if you're going to succeed somewhere as a pass rusher, it's usually next to one of the best pass rushers in the NFL, and you had Von Miller there and Bradley Chubb this last year, and you couldn't find any kind of any kind of ability to get to the quarterback, show what kind of skills, why you're such a high draft pick. I mean, I think this guy's going to struggle finding a new home.
He still has all the physicality you want. He has enough size. He has enough speed. He has all the physical traits you want to see. You just haven't seen production on the field. I think some other places will probably give him a good chance in a rotation. So if I had to pick a single spot that I would sit there and point to and say, Shane Ray should go here or this team should be interested in him, I would say my Tennessee Titans. Obviously, with Cameron Wake, 37 years old, coming in to play outside linebacker, and Harold Landry, an inexperienced rookie as well, you need more talent at that position. I would at least sign him and let him come in and kind of compete for a job, see if he can make this roster, and see if he can be a second, third, fourth pass rusher for a team. I get it didn't work out in Denver, but, I don't think at 26 we can sit there and say the ship has sailed on him. He can't turn it around.
Oh, that's not what I'm saying.
No, I agree. And I think the one-year deal, prove it kind of idea is totally fine, or maybe a 2-year super cheap deal from somewhere. Nobody's paying this.
Well, realistically, it's a one-year deal anyways, because he probably, if he doesn't succeed, won't make it into that second year anyways.
Good to see you, Brian.
I mean, that's realistic. I mean, you're talking about a team that doesn't have a lot of pass rushing ability as far as, well, you got tons of experience.
Right.
And you got youth, but you don't have any of the meat in the middle that you really want when you're looking at a great defense that can get after a quarterback. It makes sense for a team like the Titans to go after a player like this, but I would like to see some of these young guys, maybe some of these undrafted guys, and see if some of them can make a spot in the NFL roster, if it is a Tennessee Titan or not. Unfortunately for Shane Ray, I'm not knocking him down by any means. It's just you had your chance, and you had one of the best chances because, like I said, you're
playing across from Von Miller.
Exactly. And unfortunately for that, you're going to struggle to find a home.
Now, Sharice, he's saying the Titans would be a good fit. Is there another squad out there that could absolutely use this guy right now?
No, I actually think that's probably...
Well, I do think there are a lot of spots he could fit in. The Ravens, I think, would be a decent fit. You could use him in a rotational spot. Losing Zadarius Smith, you could move him out there to Baltimore, and I think that would be an okay signing. Pretty much anyone that runs a 34, I think, has some use for him. I don't think he's big enough to play defensive end in a 43. I don't think he's a guy who converts to that. But if you run a 34 and you're looking for any kind of depth, you could slot in everywhere. I just think the Titans are one of the teams that need the most depth, which is why I picked them.
No, as you asked me if there was any other team that needed him right now, the answer is no, because he would have a team. So the answer is no to me. I mean, that's
the rest of this list might have a similar answer.
But you're talking about not a 30-year-old. You're not talking about a guy that has had multiple teams that tried him out and didn't make it. This is a guy who got drafted by this team, couldn't make it on that one team. Sometimes coaches are like, I can get the best out of that guy. I can do it.
Sometimes it's politics. I mean, we don't necessarily know, even though everything I've heard is he doesn't live up to expectations. You know, they drafted him thinking he was going to be that 10, 12, 14 sack a year guy. Remember, they spent a first-round pick in this kid a while back.
If I remember correctly, I think they traded up for him, too.
I don't remember that specifically, but I do remember them taking him incredibly highly. This is the guy who solves the problem of who's going to play across from Von Miller.
Right.
And he never panned out. So they take Bradley Chubb way high in the draft, too. I mean, obviously, there's almost a no-brainer when it happens. Now, Sharif's saying, what about the Chiefs? Well, if the Chiefs are going back to the 43 like everyone says, I don't think this is as good of a fit. I don't think Frank Clark particularly fits in a 34 either. So unless you're going with some kind of hybrid defense where you're going to run both of these things, I don't think Kansas City's the best fit.
Injury barring, I don't really see a fit in there either. I mean, they're literally pretty tight on the defensive ends. And, I mean, I'm not saying that they're the greatest bunch out there, but really there's not a roster spot for another defensive end now, at least in the Chiefs depth chart.
And Sharif also threw the Patriots out there. I think that would be a good fit for them. I think that 34 principles they usually run, even though they kind of do run that hybrid defense, I think this team would find a way to make use of him. If he has the attitude, if he has the work ethic, I think he'd fit right into the Patriots. And they love discount players and rehabbing careers. So I think this would be a great fit for both sides.
Matthew said he's obviously a Vikings fan. He said the football bug has hit him hard.
I know. We should be talking about how the AAF wrapped up a couple weeks ago. Instead, we're out here talking about, NFL free agency bottom of the barrel. Well, very important stuff, by the way. We can move on.
I'm still going to go back to what I said about him. I think some coach will give him a chance. They're going to sit there and go, you had only one coach, one team. You haven't been traveling around. You're not a journeyman. Someone's going to give him a chance. But unfortunately for him, it's probably until injury comes and takes the reason why he's there.
Now, Brian's got him as a rotational guy in Houston. Would that be a good Jadeveon Clowney almost, if you don't get the long-term deal done, would he be a good guy to bring in and you say, hey, we get a year with Shane Ray, and if he works out, we can kind of buff him up into that next starter to take over for Clowney if he leaves and gets a mega deal somewhere else? I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah, it's a good possibility. I mean, don't get me wrong. Everyone needs pass rushers. Everyone needs a rotation guy. But let's not ignore exactly all the facts that you gave me. And I gave you guys as well. He's 26. He was a first-round pick. He's only played for one team. He's not a journeyman. He hasn't really been injured. All these things are usually we're going to sign him as soon as free agency starts. Well, guess what? He's still sitting there. There is an issue somewhere along this line that goes, I don't know if I want to touch Shane Ray.
What's going on, Will? Good to see you as well. Also, Sharif says, can we see Eric Berry in Cleveland or Indianapolis? More on that later, because he's on this list as well. Let's move on to number 9, though, Drew. I have Derek Morgan, 30-year-old defensive end who took a gargantuan step back when it comes to production in Tennessee. I mean, the guy went from, I don't know if he had a sack last year. I think he might have had one. You talk about defensive ends falling off at 30. Usually you get an extra couple years here, but Derek Morgan, to me, has taken one of the biggest steps back, and he's always been one of those guys that's always a step behind the quarterback. He doesn't quite get the sack. He may generate pressure, but he can't seem to get the play that's just going to bury an offense and make it 2nd and 16 or 3rd and 12 or 3rd and 14. He never really gets – he's always one step behind. Now, out there, I still believe he is the 9th best free agent. I still think he has some value. Where do you see a guy like this winding up, who maybe isn't quite going to be a pass rusher, but especially in a 43, he's played as a 43 defensive end, he's played as a 34 outside linebacker. Is there a spot that could use a guy that's primarily a run defender?
I think this is a guy that's more realistic to find a team than Shane Ray off the bat. I think this is a guy that has a lot of experience underneath his belt. Someone that definitely underperformed last year. There's no doubt about it. Found his way out of Tennessee because of it. But someone like Derek Morgan, because he has done so well in the past, this isn't a guy that has never reached his potential. This is a guy that has had potential and shown it. And, 30 years old, a little bit of a question mark there. That age is always a scary mark in football nowadays. But to be honest with you, I think Derek Morgan has a lot more possibility of finding a home than Shane Ray does.
I think you might be right, because he has performed at least at some level in the NFL, whereas we haven't really seen Shane Ray have those breakout years, or even years where he shows flashes in the pan where you're like, this guy could develop. It's one of those things where he's been a bust to this point.
Yeah. Matthew, you want me to grow my hair back out, man?
I think you like long hair Drew a little bit better.
I like long hair Drew better, too. Sad.
Also, Sharif saying Derek Morgan could be a Patriot. I think we're going to be saying that a lot for the Patriots because they need to buff up that front seven. And there's still a lot of front seven guys out there who have some value. This would be a Patriot move, right? You rehab the veteran.
He's also saying he could play for both LA teams. I completely agree with that as well.
I think he has a lot of versatility, especially with the outside linebacker versus defensive end, where he can rotate. He can play in a 4-3. He can play in a 34. Whereas some of these other guys out there, they're pretty much pigeonholed into one system or one kind of role that they're going to play. I would like to see him go to Tampa Bay, because Tampa Bay has struggled against the run mightily. I think, obviously, with Jason Pierre-Paul going out, they're going to need a defensive end who's going to be able to come in, have some experience. I think he's going to be able to set the edge very well for them. He's going to help in run defense. With them drafting Devin White and them buffing up the defensive line by signing a guy like Derek Morgan, I think they might at least be able to be better at run defense than they were in years past. And I think in the NFL, if you can't stop the run, you're not stopping much of anything. I think that's where I would look to first. Before I looked at any of these other guys out there, he fits the 43 they kind of run. He'd probably play well next to Gerald McCoy as well. I think this would be a good pickup for Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I could see it also joining like Vita Vea and I can't remember the other pass rusher on the other side, but definitely. I'm with Sharif also. He's saying Morgan can play for a contender. I mean, that's a guy that's a rotational piece that he can find himself in there. I'm not saying he's a starter from day one.
2 years ago, where he had 7 or 8 sacks for the Titans, and he was one of the best run defenders and edge setters from a defensive exterior kind of perspective. I would agree with that, but these days, after the drop he had with Tennessee, I don't know how many contenders are going to be looking at this guy like, yeah, we need to bring him in, and we need to add him to our defensive line to get that next step forward. He can help in running downs. He's the guy you want to come off the field, though, when it's 3rd and 7, and you know they're throwing.
Piece. I mean, that's exactly what he is.
He could be. I think he could play every down still, especially in a team like Tampa that just does not have talent on that defensive line, especially with Pierre-Paul out. I think he could go be a 3-down guy because he still is known for rushing the passer. He knows how to do it. I just don't think you sign this guy and expect 10 sacks. I think you sign this guy and expect 3 or 4, and you just know when they run to his side of the defensive line, he's going to be able to force them inside and let the linebackers make an easy play.
Yeah, he's not a double-digit sack kind of guy. You'd be lucky to get 8 out of him.
I don't know if he's had 10 sacks in his career. I think maybe he had 1 year at 10 sacks, and that's about it, which for a former first-rounder, you got to say, it kind of doesn't live up out of his potential coming out of Florida.
Right, and Sharif has another point. Morgan will be cheap.
Yes, he will be, or he should be at least, although he is coming off a $10 million a year contract. I wonder if that's why he's still out there, Drews, because he expects 3, 4, 5, and the NFL is expecting 1 or 2. So maybe the money is what's keeping Derek Morgan unemployed at the moment.
It's a possibility.
Let's talk about number 8, Glover Quinn, Detroit safety, 33 years old, still a decent coverage guy, all things said about him. I don't know if I necessarily want him going up to make tackles, but I think he can make an impact in the back end of a secondary.
This is another one of those guys that's going to be sitting there during free agency and possibly into the first or second, third week until there's an injury happen. I think Quinn is one of those players that could still play, because safety is one of those positions that you can literally play until your mid-30s, and he's right there at that mark, but no one's going to bring him as the centerpiece of their defense. No one's going to bring him in there as a future of safety. This is literally going to be a guy that if it's somewhere along the line that Eric Weddle gets hurt or Earl Thomas gets hurt, that they're going to bring in another veteran that's going to kind of fill that spot up. It is going to be a step down from those kind of quality players, but this is a guy that's going to have to wait until an injury happens. For him so far with the free agency, not someone picking him up right now, that's what I have to say about him.
And as for landing spots, again, I'm going Tampa Bay. I don't want to put too many guys going to one particular team, but I think Tampa Bay could really help on the back end here. They've obviously drafted a lot of back end players in the secondary over the past 2 years. They've kind of bring in a bunch of youth. I think bringing in a savvy veteran like Glover Quinn, who's been around, he's well respected both in his time at Houston and in Detroit. He's a guy who can also make plays on the ball and can also play this free safety role as well. If he has anything left in the tank, I think Tampa should give him a call and see if he can actually make things happen. Because, look, the secondary, for all they spent on it last year and all they've spent on the draft this year, has not been fixed, has not been good enough. You could sit there and say it's the pass rush. I think it's both. I think they need more talent on both things, or on both kind of fronts, and I think Glover Quinn is the guy who can make things happen.
Sharif says he can see Quinn playing for the Chargers or Indy. Both of those teams have injury bugs, and for sure the Chargers in their secondary. So it's a good possibility, and Indy in their secondary later in the year with I want to say Mike. That's their safety, Mike. I keep on forgetting.
Malik Hooker.
Was it Hooker?
Is that what you're talking about?
Well, it was an older guy, one of the older safeties that went down at the end of the year. But anyways, regardless, you're 100% right, man. I agree with it. Both of those teams would make complete sense for him to go there, but I don't see him being signed until there's an injury happening.
And Sharif, I understand he wants a championship. I bet you if you ask all these free agency guys, that would be one thing they're talking about first is I want to win before I sign with a team that's going to pay me a little bit more money and not be good. The problem is, a lot of the time, these teams are not looking for a bunch of players. The teams that are close to winning a championship probably aren't looking for a 33-year-old perennial, mid-tier to slightly above safety to come in and make an impact right away.
Right now, it's all about rookies.
He already missed his shot. Eric Weddle signed with the Rams, right?
Right now, in this time of free agency, it's all about rookies, undrafted rookies, and they're going to find out what they got out of that group. And if they cannot find someone or injury prone happens, that's when you see some of these older veterans getting off the free agency list. And that's it. I mean, that's just plain and simple. I hate to say it about everyone on this list, but it's just the truth. Maybe minus one or two.
I think there's a few of them that still have some potential or whatever you want to call it, guys that can make high impact. I don't think Logan Quinn's one of them. So when we're at 7, I think there's a big gap between 7 and 4. Let me just say that. I think 7 and there's still probably 4 or 5 of these guys out there that can make a pretty good impact.
Even though they can make an impact, there's a reason why they're not getting signed. It's either because they haven't decided on what team they want to play for. I think it's
probably money for some of them.
Or it's the fact that there's not a lot of teams asking about them.
Absolutely. Let's talk about number 7, though, Drew. Muhammad Wilkerson, formerly of Green Bay, defensive interior guy. He could play defensive end or defensive tackle in a 34, I believe, and you could argue he can make an impact in a 43 if you played him at the 3 technique, or you play him over the nose there. If he plays 1 technique, maybe he can sit there and convert into that role in a 43. This is a guy that I think anyone that needs help on the defensive interior should be considering him, and I think the team that should consider him most is Atlanta. Obviously, Grady Jarrett's been a great player for them, but they've been lacking that next guy who's going to come in and make an impact. They drafted Deidrin Senat to do that, although it's kind of been a mixed bag with him. He's had some good plays. He hasn't really been consistent. I would also bring in Muhammad Wilkerson so you can have a rotation there in Atlanta. That way, if the injury bug does get you or something happens to Grady Jarrett, you have an experienced guy who still has upside. I believe this is one of those guys that, unlike some of the guys at the bottom end of this list, still has potential to be a very good player.
This is a guy that showed that he's a great player. You got to remember, he played for the Jets. He got a big contract, showed that he was worth all that stuff. But then he didn't.
Exactly.
And then now it's been 2 years in a row where the last year in the Jets and then with Green Bay, that he literally kind of just didn't show that he has the will to want to play anymore. I don't get me wrong. I think he could still play. I think he can go, as Sharif said, as he's reading my mind, can go anywhere. But the thing is
there have been questions about his attitude.
How? Yeah.
And if you're a championship team or you're moving in there, unless you need to get better specifically at defensive tackle, do you call this guy? I think no. Not if he's going to be a guy who's going to mess up your locker room. So, especially with the Jets, there's a lot of talk about, even before he got his big contract, before he got paid, he doesn't have the attitude we want to see out of a franchise-level player. That's why they moved on from him. Do you want to sign him if you're Kansas City and you're like, we need to win right now? Or the Patriots. You don't go after this guy because he's the guy that he's the poison pill in the locker room. You do not go and pay a guy like that. If you're Atlanta and you need to add more, it's worth the risk at that point. You can sit there and say, we will work with the attitude. We're not worried about that. We'll find a way to make it work with him, and he can make an impact on our defensive line to help out. It insulates Atlanta against injury, which has been one of their biggest concerns over the past couple of years. I think this is a good signing for Atlanta. I wouldn't say anywhere. I think a lot of these championship teams are sitting there saying, for what he brings to the table, he's not worth the attitude.
Wilkerson is he's a Swiss Army knife on the defensive line. And that's why the reason I think he can go anywhere. If you're looking for someone to play in the middle, he can do it. If you're looking to put him on the edge to get the pass rusher, he can do that as well. Sharif also said he could see him go to Seattle. That might be a great fit for him. And of course, I think they're going to look more for like a speed rusher on the side, on the defensive end.
Well, it's not selling me short. They agree. They think both Brian and Sharif say Atlanta would be a good spot for him as well. But I think Seattle's another one of those teams, like I was saying, and I agree with you here, that needs to up its game just a little bit if they think they're going to win a Super Bowl. They made the playoffs last year. Obviously, things didn't go their way. But if you could add a piece or two, and I know Frank Clark is gone, but if they can add a couple more pieces, all of a sudden, at least in their minds, they're going to be thinking, we can go get to the Super Bowl. I think Wilkinson fits into a team like that much better than he fits into a team that's already ready-made to succeed.
Yeah, and at the age of 29, he's sitting there where he'll probably be a 2 to 3 year contract, really heavy on that first year, possibly lose out if he doesn't do well. This is, even though he probably deserves a 1 year improvement deal just because of his age, they're probably going to try to hold him off just in case he performs well.
Let's talk about number 6, Danny Shelton, coming out of the Patriots. I know he has not had the career living up to where he's at, but he's 26, Drew. He's a young defensive tackle that can make an impact. He was an unsung player in the Patriots front seven last year, which was not necessarily a great player, or a great unit, I should say. Outside of Trey Flowers, they kind of struggled. I think Green Bay needs to pick him up. With Muhammad Wilkerson departing, they need more help on their interior. They just paid the edge rushers. it's not going to do you any good to sign all those edge rushers if teams can run for 3 or 4 yards on first and second down and get to manageable third downs. I think Danny Shelton would be a good signing for Green Bay to kind of shore up that interior of the defensive line.
Yeah, this is one of those players that kind of shocked me a little bit that he hasn't found a way or a home yet. And when you think about it, think about all the Patriot players that leave. Everyone sees what they could be in the Patriot uniform. They think they can get that same potential, or maybe just a slight bit less. I mean, Shelton wasn't a terrible player by any means. It was just one of those things that Patriots do where they're like, you're no longer
even in Cleveland.
You're no longer. Well, I mean, you're right, but you're no longer a value to me in my system. I'm gonna replace you with somebody else that's cheaper and younger. So this is a guy that I'm a little bit surprised has not found a home yet. And I'm not saying he's a starter. I'm not going to sit there. He'll be the best guy on your defensive line. It's just a little bit of a shocker that he has not found a home.
Absolutely. And again, with a lot of these defensive players, we're sitting there saying any one of these teams could sit there and pick him up. Sharif is agreeing with me, saying Green Bay would be a good landing spot for him. He's also saying Carolina, which I totally agree. Yeah. When you're as defensively minded as Carolina is, you can never have enough defensive linemen to step in and rotate and everything like that. I think Danny Shelton is one of those guys that with his age and with his draft pedigree when Cleveland took him in the first round, right, he could go to a lot of these places that need help on the interior and rotate. I just don't think you're signing this guy expecting him to be to resurge in his career. I don't think, especially even with the Patriots, with what we saw last year, if they couldn't make it work, you're not signing this guy and saying he's going to be our next defensive anchor on the inside of the defensive line. I think you sign him and say he's a guy that comes in and maybe he's our second, maybe he's our third, and he gives us some good snaps. He gives us 30% of the snaps, and we get some quality play out of him.
Another first-round pick that will more than likely find a home. It just depends on when.
I think a lot of these guys will find a home before the season starts, but it'll be news that's kind of under the radar. Let's talk about number 5 here, Drew. Trey Boston, formerly of Arizona. This guy, for free safeties, as far as he goes, has had a pretty good couple of years to not be signed. I think he's kind of expressed some of his frustrations with not being signed and not being paid extremely well for a free safety. This is one of those guys that, even though he's done very well, it seems like nobody wants to take a chance on a 27-year-old.
Well, until this year of, honestly, a free agency, safety's been a commodity. Safety's just one of those things where you could find a safety anywhere, kind of like a running back. This is the first year in free agency with like the Landon Collins deal that you're going, holy crap, they're spending a lot of money on these safeties and free safeties. With him, I think it's a scenario of where he played. And unfortunately for him, regardless of how well he played, he's going to be overshadowed by Patrick Peterson. He's going to be overshadowed by Arizona not doing well. So even though he is a player that can perform pretty much on any team, in my opinion, that stuff makes a difference when, when people look at him and think about, okay, is he worth $5-7 million a year?
No. And I agree with that. I think it's going to be a low-dollar deal. It's going to be a prove-it deal as well. I mean, I know he's coming off 2 prove-it, 1-year deals up to this point, but I think he's in for a third one. I don't think anyone's going to sit there and look at what he's done and commit say, we'll give you 3 years with some guaranteed money that we just have to have you on our team. Not when there's guys like Adrian Amos and Earl Thomas and Eric Berry, who we're going to talk about here in a minute, all floating out there that you could sit there and say, I would much rather have those guys than Trey Boston on my team. The only argument against Eric Berry versus him is you can say the age and the injury.
Right.
Where Trey Boston has been healthier, he's younger as well. But when it comes to top end, you're not getting top end with Trey Boston that you're getting out of Eric Berry. It's just you're still talking about elite players versus guys who are just good.
Before you say who you think he can go to, Sharif is already saying he would be a Redskin.
I think to play right next to their high-dollar safety signing, Landon Collins, I think would be a fantastic move for them. I think them bringing in a guy like Trey Boston to play as a free safety, that would really flesh out the secondary, which, if you look, has been the weakness of the Redskins, at least when we're talking defensively here. Their front seven is pretty much set. It's stacked.
It is.
So if you bring Trey Boston in, I think that would be a good signing. The question is, are they going to be able to find a deal? Nobody overpays people like the Redskins, or very few teams do. So I could definitely see him signing a contract there for probably more money than other teams are willing to give him.
More than likely.
Let's move on to number 4 and talk about Jamie Collins.
Did you tell him where you thought it was?
I did not. I would like to see, actually, Trey Boston moving on to the Giants. They're going to need a replacement for Landon Collins. His defense is totally just bereft of defensive talent. They've traded away guys like Eli Apple. They've traded away Olivier Vernon. They have lost a lot of talent. And Landon Collins, let him walk to free agency. They have lost so much talent in the Giants. I think this is a move you almost have to make. And just bring in a safety. Short of them going after someone like Eric Berry instead, they need to get better at safety. I know they just signed Jabril Peppers. I would bring on a free safety to play across from Peppers and let Peppers play much more forward, play like a linebacker in the box. All of a sudden, you've got the guy that can drop over the top like Trey Boston.
And this is exactly a great place for Trey Boston to find a home at, is in a big marketing area like like New York City. There is no other better one than that. Talk about a guy that has a chance. Hey, put me on a one prove it deal. Let me prove I'm worth a big contract to you guys, and then maybe he can find it, because you aren't going to find that in Arizona, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Let's talk Jamie Collins at number 4 next. Coming out of Cleveland, obviously the big trade with the Patriots. They gave him the big contract, Drew, and he never really lived up to it, but he's still only 26. Are you willing to sit there and gamble on a guy like Jamie Collins, who played really well for the Patriots, and then as soon as he left and went to Cleveland, all that kind of production evaporated?
Yeah, I think this is another one of those scenarios where you're going to find a coach that says, I can get that potential back out of him. Maybe, I'm blanking out on the old Browns coach right now.
Greg Williams?
No. Well, Greg Williams was his coordinator, but
Hugh Jackson.
Hugh Jackson couldn't get the best out of Jamie Collins, and maybe a coach is going to be like, I can still get that potential. And I know you picked a different team than I have. To be honest with you, I'd like to see him with the Kansas City Chiefs. I think we're a little bit weak in that linebacking group. Bringing in someone like Jamie Collins, then maybe Andy Reid. And
for a guy who's played on the edge,
who could get the best out of him.
For a guy who's played on the edge, I think it would be weird if you did shift to a pure 43. But some teams have tried to go with the undersized guy at 43 as well. I think with Frank Clark on the other side.
I'll get what you're saying, but you got to remember he played in the Patriots defense. Talk about a team that literally
Multiple
doesn't really
schemes.
have one spot for you to play.
But here's the thing. The Patriots maximize somebody's talent. So they played a lot of 34. They play a lot of multiple fronts.
You're going to doubt Andy Reid's coaching ability?
On defense, yeah, because Andy Reid's not a defensive coach. Yes, so for that kind of point of view, I'm going to say the Chiefs aren't maybe the best fit for a guy like Jamie Collins. I think there's some other guys on this list who might fit the Chiefs a little bit better. I'm not saying it's impossible. You could try to make him into a 43 defensive end and put him on the other side, and you have the pass rusher that you just put the biggest linebacker you can behind him and let that be your run defense on that side. But especially in a 43, you can't have those undersized guys without strong linebackers behind them, because they get blown off the ball, and it's too easy to run on one side. So that's why I would be a little confused to see the Chiefs take him. But again, when you're talking about the Chiefs, they like to bring big names, and they like to bring big talent to the defensive front. For that kind of standpoint, I would agree with that.
I'd sit there and put him right behind Frank Clark. You're talking about another great pass rusher, great run stopper. You throw someone like Jamie Collins right behind him. You're talking about a side that a lot of teams won't run the ball to.
Sharif, I was with you all the way through here. He says, except for this one, you kind of lost me a little bit. He says, I can see Collins at Carolina, the Chiefs, or maybe Pittsburgh. I just don't think he has the size to play for a legitimate 43. Teams like the Carolina Panthers and the Kansas City Chiefs now wanting to play 43. I don't think he fits in those schemes very well. I think Pittsburgh would be the best fit of those three. I could see Pittsburgh signing him for sure. But I think the other two are a little bit kind of off base. I don't think he's a big enough guy to play 43. I don't think we're going to move him to the defensive end.
Just me and you.
Hey, I've been with Sharif everywhere else up to this point, but that's okay.
Just on the Jamie Collins, that's all we're saying.
Charlie also says a good coach or a great player will bring out the best in his teammates. I agree with you on that. The question is going to be, what kind of coach thinks they're going to be able to reinvigorate this career? And for me, I think I see him going to a team like Baltimore. Where else do you bring in a bunch of defensive talent and just turn these guys loose? Usually they go with no names, but I think they can absolutely rehab this career. They can bring in a guy like Jamie Collins, run more of a 34 set, let him be the edge rusher that they need with guys like Terrell Suggs and Zadarius Smith both leaving the offseason. I think this would be a great signing for them. Not to mention you're robbing a division opponent in the Cleveland Browns.
I mean, don't get me wrong. That's a great signing too. It makes more sense because they're so depleted on defense, but let's just be honest. Teams are going to be looking for anyone to make a difference in play on defense. And when you look at a team that's struggling in a position like the Chiefs or like Carolina or even Pittsburgh for a matter, Jamie Collins is an ideal guy to come in there and replace somebody.
Sharif also asks, is 26 years of age of bad luck? And let me say this, it's only bad luck if you're not good on the football field. If you are, that's usually where you get that fresh new contract for 4 or 5 years. So it's either the best or the worst. No, there's not much in between. Let's move forward to talk about number 3, Drew. Jay Ajayi.
Let's do it.
Running back, formerly of Philadelphia, 26. This is the most intriguing guy on the list, I think. To see a guy who had all the talent, all the upside in the world coming from Miami, had showed some flash in Philadelphia as well. Then all of a sudden, it's like everything just turned against him. Now all of a sudden, he's the guy who can't get things done. He's got no talent. Everyone's kind of dogging him and everything like that. Drew, we're talking about a guy that was probably a 3rd or 4th round pick in fantasy last year, being still a free agent right now at this point at 26 years old.
I don't think it's no one think he has talent. It's just like he's too off and on. He's like a light switch. There's big games that he just goes completely off, and there's no way of stopping him. And he looks like one of the best running backs in the league. And then he does like a 2 to 3 week stint where it's just like you're one of the worst running backs in the NFL. And I'll say this about it: running back is a commodity. There's no doubt about it. They can find talent anywhere in the draft from round 1 to round 7 that you could put someone in there, play 16 games, and get average play. So if you want to be a 26-year-old running back in the NFL, you perform over average. You perform above average all the time. And a 1 week, a 2 week, and a 3 week stint of not being above average at 26 years old at a running back, you're not going to find yourself a lot of places to call home.
To Brian's question, do you think it's the injuries? Have the injuries derailed his career at this point? I mean, I know he is a guy that kind of goes in and out of the lineup a lot. I do think, look, when I saw him in Miami, I also said he's a flash in the pan. I said he's not a guy that's as good as everyone wants to talk him up because he had a good season in Miami. Even with Adam Gase, who, let's face it, got the best out of Jay Cutler. He made Jay Cutler look like an MVP almost.
Yeah. To be honest with you, until last year, he's never had a significant injury that he's lost an ample amount of time on the field. I think that does become a little bit of a question mark, which he'll find a little bit less money in his contract. But I do think someone will pick this guy up because let's completely admit it. Besides quarterback, everyone gets hurt. Everyone misses a week or two. It's the guys that can't stay on the field when they're getting hurt for like 6, 8 weeks, 16 weeks. That's where you're going to struggle. Jay Ajayi, besides last year, has really proved he is a workhorse in the NFL. Question is, he just can't stay productive.
I think he could be a very good number 2 running back, which is why my perfect fit for him would be the LA Rams. When they signed C.J. Anderson last year, I think it was the best insurance blanket they could have bought, and I think they've kind of learned their lesson maybe going forward. That's why they drafted a running back in the 3rd round as well to try to back up a guy like Todd Gurley. They don't want to have Todd Gurley take 400 touches during the course of a season and then get to the playoffs and be totally exhausted and be totally useless. If they want to win a Super Bowl, they need to keep Todd Gurley fresh. And to do that, you need talent at that number 2 spot. I think Jay Ajayi would be the perfect fit for them. He's a guy that's competent enough to make things happen, has enough of a high ceiling that he can take over a game if you need him to. He's a guy that can do almost everything for the Rams as well. I like to see him go there. And it could be an upgrade over C.J. Anderson. We could see the Rams go even win a Super Bowl because they have the good 1-2 punch at running back.
I can see that as a good pick. Sharif saying he could be a buck or a number 2 at the Rams or the Saints because he's agreeing with you. I also got another team that he might be
See,
with.
I told you we're on the same page, Sharif.
I have another team that's something we're not all thinking about. Carolina. After McCaffrey is, when he gets tired, they need someone to go in there. They need someone to be that next workhorse.
And that's what I've been saying. But I think they've kind of disproven that that's not what they want. I mean, last year they signed C.J. Anderson, and everyone's like, okay, that'll be a great 1-2 punch. And then what happened? By like week 6, they cut C.J. Anderson, and it's all Christian McCaffrey. They're just convinced we're going to wear this guy out. By the time he's 28, he's not going to be able to walk anymore. They just put everything on McCaffrey's shoulders. So I don't think Carolina is interested in signing him, but I will give you this. I think that would be a good landing spot for him. Also, Sharif said Tampa Bay. I can't sit there and say Tampa Bay is a spot because I already have them a couple times on my list, and I didn't want to say every free agent here should go to Tampa Bay to get them better.
Well, I said,
would be a good spot.
Carolina, and Sharif's thrown every free agent so far to Carolina. So
As for the Saints,
those are the 2 teams that are getting everybody.
Just finishing it up, as for the Saints, they did sign Latavius Murray already, and I do believe he's a little bit better than Latavius Murray is, but I'd be shocked to see the Saints sign another running back. It wouldn't be a bad fit. I just don't know if necessarily they're going to go spend the money to go bring a guy like Ajayi in when they already have what I think they consider their 1-2 punch.
And Charlie says, when the game is on the line, you need your best. And that's kind of where I'm getting at with Jay Ajayi. Even though he shows flashes in the pan where it's like, man, this guy's good, he seems to disappear when you need him.
That's why you bring him in as Robin, and you have Todd Gurley be the Batman. So I think that would be the best fit. Any team that has a running back currently right now that is looking for a backup that can run the ball with power, that can run with a little bit of speed.
Brian brought up a great team in the Packers.
I like Aaron Jones. I think Brian's a Chicago fan. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Brian, but I'm pretty sure you're a Chicago fan. I like Aaron Jones. I like what they already have going. They have Jamal Williams as well as a running back who can run with power as well. I don't know how he fits in there. I think maybe he could take it over and be better than either one of those guys. But I think with what they've got and what it would probably cost to bring Ajayi in, they're probably not entirely interested in it.
Jeremy, we're glad you could join us. It's always a party when you and that beard come in.
Absolutely, man. Good to see you. Let's move on to number 2. A guy you know intimately well, Eric Berry. Intimately. He's one of your favorite players, as I'm told.
No, I kicked him out of my house since then.
Formerly of Kansas City, the 30-year-old safety who struggled mightily with injuries these past couple of years is now a free agent. Drew, he's coming off a big money deal with Kansas City. Where would you like to see a guy like Eric Berry go?
Back to the Chiefs, man. I ain't gonna lie. Back to the Chiefs. The only reason he's sitting out there is because no one knows what kind of injury he actually has. This is not an injury through football moves. This is hereditary. He has bone spurs on both of his heels that are messing with his Achilles, that are causing him to be really tight. He neglected to have surgery on his other one, but a lot of doctors are saying he needs it. We're talking about a 30-year-old safety at his prime that was literally the best safety in the league. I don't care what anyone says, even over Earl Thomas. It sucks for him, to be honest with you. But if he can get cleared, or if he can have surgery on that other heel so his Achilles can stay attached and not ripped, I mean, you're talking about a guy that can come into any system, in my opinion, and be above to average safety. Let's be completely honest. I'm not denying here that he's been away from the game for way too long. We saw him play in the Patriots, and he seemed to be a shadow of himself, but he obviously wasn't at full speed. So you're talking about a player that's going to need to get healthy completely before he can find a home. But luckily for him, he plays the position on defense that you can play into your late 30s if you know how to. So the first thing he needs to do is find a way to get healthy.
I agree with you, man. I mean, between the cancer and, like you said, all the hereditary stuff, I don't know if anyone's had worse injury luck than Eric Berry. On top of it, as for our comment section, Sharif says Berry can be a Brown or a Colt, maybe even the Patriots. He's still in my Thunder because I think Indianapolis is the perfect landing spot here. They've shown a willingness to pay veterans. They've shown a willingness to take Chiefs.
With say you can match up with Justin Houston again.
Exactly. I would like to see him go to Indianapolis, put him next to Malik Hooker, play him in more of a strong safety role where you let him tackle a little bit. You move that strong safety to cover the tight end and let Malik Hooker play over the top. I think that would be a pretty good setup for them. Not to mention, Indianapolis has all this money. Even if you wanted to overpay a little bit, I think bringing a guy like Berry, if you could ever find his health, like you kind of mentioned before, if he ever finds any little bit of that elite play we got out of him, Indianapolis can totally use that on their back end of their secondary. This is the kind of move that wins you Super Bowls. If they could bring in a guy like that, I would sign him right now to be my fourth safety and sit there and say, I'm just going to gamble on maybe he gets healthy. And then all of a sudden we have one of the best safeties just coming back.
I mean, that's exactly what the Chiefs did last year.
Exactly. And you have, unlike the Chiefs, Indianapolis has all this free cap space.
Right.
They can sit there and spend whatever they want on Eric Berry. There's almost no reason, I think, for them not to do this. As for the other ones you mentioned, Brian is saying the Chiefs would be a good fit for him. I agree. Maybe they bring him back on a cheap deal. Would you like to see a reunion?
I would too. Love it.
Sharif's also saying the Browns. I think he would fit pretty well with Jabril Peppers. You could move him into more of a free safety role there. The cool thing about Eric Berry is he has the skill sets where he can play free, he can play strong, he tackles really well, he covers really well, he plays zone coverage really well. He can do literally anything you want him to do. And I know the old saying, jack of all trades is a master of none, but this guy's like a master of all trades. So I think any one of these kind of roles you want to put him into, he could actually absolutely find a role and find a spot in any team almost.
Absolutely. Jeremy says, too much liability. He's a great player, though, but he can make an impact on any team. I think we're completely agreeant with that. We're talking about a guy that he can, even just a smidge less than what he was, is still a great player on any team in the NFL.
Absolutely. And Sharif saying the Colts have a lot of money. I totally agree. And Jeremy says he'd like to see him on the Colts. Look, I think that's the right move to make. Spend $3 million of that $100 million you've got sitting in your wallet right now and sit there and say, he's our fourth safety. If he gets healthy, if he can finally find his way onto a football field, we're that much better for having him. There's no reason to not do it, but the Colts have been a head-scratcher. I mean, Ballard, for as much praise as everyone heaps on him and everything, has had $100 million in a team that was very close to making it to the Super Bowl. If they would play the Chiefs a little bit better, I think they could have beat the Patriots. I look at this, Drew. I mean, I'm like, why are you not spending all this money to try to get there?
I literally think it's a strategy to keep your draft picks. I know that the
you don't have to spend them here, though.
I know the contracts are far out, but maybe they do a deal a little bit earlier. Maybe their offensive line, again, just does one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, and maybe they're like, we're going to keep this group together, and the next thing you know, that's the highest paid offensive line.
And going back to the comment section, you don't even need to make this a pay-for-play kind of scenario. You can sit there and give them guaranteed money because you have it to spend. It's wasted if you don't. So Indianapolis might as well open the wallet and try to bring more talent on while they have the chance. Let's talk about our last guy, though.
1 second, because the comment Sharif made is exactly what kind of contract you'll find with Eric Berry. It'll be a contract based on performance. There's no doubt about it. That's exactly the contract you'll
that's what I was talking about. But I don't think you need to if you're Indianapolis. Other teams, yes. If you're tight on cap space, sure. Make it performance-based for Eric Berry. But you got $100 million sitting in the wallet, Drew. Just spend it. Sit there and give him some guaranteed money for a year.
I'm not disagreeing with the Colts signing what you're saying about the Colts. What I'm saying about any contract that Eric Berry gets, it's going to be performance enhanced and contract.
I'm saying it shouldn't if you're Indianapolis.
I'm agreeing with you.
Right, and that's my point. If you're anyone else, sure, you can make a performance base for a guy who's missed that much time. That's important. Yeah. But for Indianapolis, who has more money than God at the moment, you just spend the money, right? You just spend it, and you don't care about
How much money does God have?
I don't know.
Okay.
But they have more than him.
Didn't sound like a lot.
More than $100 million?
I mean, that's
doing better than me.
Pocket change, man.
Let's talk about Ndamukong Suh being our best available free agent here, Drew. How much left does this guy have in the tank? That, to me, is the question.
This is my one player that it's not because he hasn't had teams requiring about him. This is a guy that's going, I'm going to wait until I find the right opportunity, the right team. I want to win a ring. He, at one point in time, this was the best defensive player in the NFL, or arguably one of the best defensive players in the NFL. This is a guy that can sit there and it was more than likely going to be a Hall of Famer. You know, so what's one thing that stamps you into the Hall of Fame for sure is usually a Super Bowl ring. And maybe the one team that didn't hit him up was the Patriots. Maybe he's thinking, I could go back to the Rams, but I don't know how much I believe in it. I mean, this is a guy that I don't think has any issues with teams calling him and asking what it costs to bring him in for his
exactly
for his performance. It's the fact that he's waiting to find the right spot.
And my question is, what are you going to get out of him? Obviously, we saw his talent decline a little bit with the Rams. He was not the same Ndamukong Suh that we saw even in Miami. The question is going to be how much is left of the tank, but if you're some of these teams like Denver that need to get back on track and need to be sure on the interior of your defensive line, look, they've already got the exterior fixed, right? They've got Bradley Chubb out there. They've got Von Miller on the other side of him. They have guys even like Ethan Wolf who are going to be able to support you in the middle. I would like to see Ndamukong Suh go somewhere like Denver and just be part of one of the best defensive lines in football at that point. Work on the strengths. Get better at your strengths, and all of a sudden you're going to have an identity. I think the Denver Broncos would be the best team for it. Sharif is saying the Chargers, so I don't think that's a bad spot either, especially when you're talking about him playing with guys like Bosa and Ingram on the outside. That would be, again, a great fit for him. I think any team that needs an interior lineman should absolutely be giving this guy a call, even at this time of year.
I'm going to stick with the AFC West, and I'm literally going to say the Chiefs.
Charlie's open. No, he goes nowhere, but somebody is going to. Before you see the season start, somebody will spend a little bit of money on Ndamukong Suh. I think the biggest thing is, what's the right price for a guy that seems to be starting to decline?
I'd like to see him on the Chiefs. Chris Jones is definitely their star player on that defensive line, but he's not really much of a guy that sits right in the front that takes up a lot of blocks and stops the run. He's more of a pass rushing defensive tackle. I know they took Nnamdi in like around 2 or 3 in a couple of years ago in the draft, but to bring in someone like Sanu that can alternate with those guys would be huge for the defensive line for the Chiefs. Talk about someone that can come in there and make a difference in the run game.
And I think they're hoping Kalen Saunders turns into that guy.
And don't get me wrong, they drafted Saunders as well, but to have 4 guys that legitimately could start at any point in time, that's what you're looking for.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed what you saw. If you did, make sure you subscribe to our page here and throw us a like if you don't mind.
Guys, remember this is Sports Around the Bar, so grab your favorite drinks, join one of the fastest growing communities on YouTube. We can't wait to hear from you.